and actually scrape and urinate like that. So he's going to try and fly under the radar as much as possible until he gets a little bit older, until he gets to about 4 or 5 years old, and that's when he'll start to then actually push for dominance and mating. But isn't that beautiful with all the grass? Absolutely amazing. So Donna, you're wondering if he's always had that little notch in the top of his ear. Well, Donna, I'm actually not sure. I was just looking at that myself and wondering the same thing. Now, I'm sure there's a lot of viewers out there that will definitely know, so if you do know, hashtag Safari Live, and you can help us out and let us know if Hosana's always had his little notch in his left ear. And it's interesting because it doesn't look like a cut or anything like that. It just looks like the shape of the ear is slightly different on the edge there. You can see it looks like there's a little piece missing out that's quite old. That's definitely healed. So yes, it must have been there for a while. It's definitely not something that's very new, but I've actually never noticed it before. I was looking at the exact same thing in that shot and wondering whether or not that notch is new or not. But now that I can see with the ear kind of moving towards us, you can see there's no sort of fresh sign of blood or scabbing, so I would imagine that's quite an old nick and has been there for quite some time. You can see how he's watching around. From where he is now, he's got the perfect sort of vantage point to see what's going on. He's on a very tall termite mound, and from up there he'll be able to watch over this area and to see if there's any sign of potential prey animals or any other leopards that could be moving around. And you can see now he's going back down, and I wonder if he hasn't spotted that male impala that I was referring to earlier. I think maybe he missed it because he's looking in the same direction where that male impala was and is now heading back the way he came. So I wonder if he's not going to maybe try and head in that direction, although it seems like he's now changed again and going around the side of the mound. Might be a bit hot on top there. The sun has come out and it is starting to get a little bit warm, so maybe he's going to try and see if he can't find some shade. So I think what we'll try to do is try and just see if we can't move and find ourselves a better position. I'm just trying to see which way he goes because I can see some grass moving. Oh, he's back on top of his mount. What are you doing, Hosana? Maybe he just decided to go on a walkabout of the mound and just explore this sort of castle that he's on. And he's back exactly where he started again. I wonder if he wasn't trying to find a place to lie down in the shade and there just wasn't a comfy spot down further down, and he's now going to find somewhere else to lie and show us his bum. So I'm going to just move so that we can actually see something other than his spotted little tail. Now, while we try and reposition and get ourselves into a more friendly place, I believe Jamie's still out and about and on foot and looking around for all the small things. So let's go see where she is and what she's doing.
The small things and the big things. We're on Zoe's Road checking for hyena tracks, and weirdly, completely in sort of opposition to what we've been experiencing recently, there's not a single hyena track to be found. But my heart's still beating fast from the excitement of that really truly amazing mantis sighting. We've spoken about the big things. There's a kudu in here that I want to try and show you. Kudu are difficult on foot, they're so shy. But he's just gone in here. It's a magnificent big bull. Oh, I'll come to why I'm going ooh in a moment. No, I think he's disappeared already. Oh, there we go. There's a female looking at us. I don't know if you can see it there, Ferg. Can you see it? Not really. She might have ducked away. You've got her. Brilliant. Well done. Obviously, getting close to the antelope on foot is not always an easy thing. The Nyala are pretty relaxed, but Kudu are very, very shy, and they like to disappear. And the fact that we've even managed to get her to stay still is fantastic. You can see her looking at us with those massive ears, both pointed straight at us. Okay, let me show you why I said ooh. It's not hard to see why I said ooh. It's very clearly in the middle of the road, kind of an ooh. That is very fresh. So I noticed his tracks a while back. the bull elephant that's walked along this road. So now the question is, when has he walked along this road and how fresh is this? Well, look at how wet this dung is. This is really very new. There's no heat on the top, so it's cooled down, but it's a cool morning. And if we go into the center of this pile of dung, it's cool in the middle. Okay, so it's not that warm, it's not that fresh. And the bull elephant, when you're trying to track him down, this bull could have walked, it could have covered 2 kilometers in the time it's taken me to sit and actually examine that dung. It's a slight exaggeration, but tracking a bull elephant when it's on a mission can be a difficult thing. Fortunately, though, he's not on a mission. He's stopped and he's had some food, been eating bush willow. You can see the remains of them strewn along the road, and some grass as well. And just for our new viewers, obviously we've got very fresh wet dung, and you'd noticed me touching it. I will wash my hands afterwards. I will never ever do this with predator scat, not even old predator scat. But herbivore dung, I have never ever got sick from it. Look, maybe I think our constitutions at this point are relatively robust, but I will be washing my hands afterwards before I go and eat some breakfast. I'm going to see if I can track this elephant bull down. Maybe we get lucky and he hasn't moved off too far. And speaking of creatures moving off, let's go and see whether or not Hosana's made his way any closer to the boundary.
Well, Jamie, he hasn't. He's now found himself a beautiful termite mound to just lie and watch the world go by. And he's looking ever. So I think that Shungile might be on her way back this way, and maybe that's why he's lying on top of this mound and just watching what's going on, maybe trying to see whether this is indeed his sister or maybe a different leopard that could be approaching. So he's found himself the perfect place. Now, Jamie's saying she's going to be tracking elephants. Well, she was the elephant whisperer yesterday, so I'm hoping that she will be able to find them. I saw quite fresh tracks around Treehouse Dam area as well, heading sort of northwards, so maybe those are the same tracks that she's on and she'll have some luck finding them. But isn't that beautiful? So you can see he's starting to get a little bit sleepy now. His eyes are starting to close, and it's this typical sort of winter phase that we go through with cats. They often are like this. They move around in the early hours of the morning, and then as that sun starts to get warm, they tend to lie and just kind of absorb a bit of warmth and sunshine before they then start finding some shade. And you'll often find the cats on top of mounds like this just watching. But he is so beautiful. He's got the most amazing eyes and face. So Megan, this is a question that I've been asked many times throughout my guiding career, and it's whether or not Hosana or an individual leopard would recognize our voices or our smells. Well, I would imagine that they definitely recognize some of the sounds that we make. I don't know if they recognize each individual as a sort of different entity, but I would imagine with the sense of hearing that they have, that they would be able to differentiate between all of our voices and know that certain voices are certain individuals. But the thing is that if you look at Hosana, the first time I ever saw him, he would never have known who I was, but yet his sort of demeanor was still the same. So he didn't react any differently to me as he would to, well, me the first time as he does to me now after spending quite a bit of time with him. So I think they do recognize the sort of smells and the sounds associated with vehicles, but whether they differentiate that from each individual is debatable. It's possible, and given that their senses are so good, I would imagine that they can, but they seem to not show too many different reactions to different people. I've watched Hosana and I've seen now 3 different vehicles coming in, and his behavior hasn't really changed across those 3 different vehicles, and it's not like he's drifted closer to any sort of in particular person. So I would imagine that they can kind of differentiate, but they don't sort of apply a different behavior around that unless somebody's done something really negative to them. So if, let's say, I had to drive now up into the mound and chase him and do all of those kind of things, then I think over time he would be able to recognize my sort of voice and the sound of Jigger, and he would know that that's something he needs to be scared of. But nowadays, in his lifetime, he's been treated with respect by multiple guides, and so he's pretty relaxed with vehicles and the sounds of most of the voices that he hears. It's interesting though, because if we sort of apply it to other animals, there used to be a rhino in this area called Stompy, Skewhorn, and he used to have a particular hatred for one guide, and nobody knew why. And this guide, I asked him, did you ever have a sort of time where you chased him or anything like that? And he said no. But this time, every single time that guide would come down the road and his voice would be heard, that rhino would come charging straight towards him and try and horn his vehicle. And with all the other guides, he was very relaxed. You would be able to spend lots of time. But with that particular guide, he used to get such trouble from that individual. So there must be a case of these animals recognizing something in us and our voices, and knowing that that was a particularly sort of person that maybe in some stage had chased that rhino or had done something to cause that response. So I think they're a lot more intelligent than we give them credit for. So I would imagine that they do recognize us, but whether or not they apply a different behavior is still very much a debatable situation. But although Hosana is still intent on watching, I wonder if he's not watching that male impala. Like I said earlier, there wasn't a male impala that was just off to our western side, and it seems like he's kind of watching in that direction. Maybe he's hoping that that male impala will get closer. The nice thing about being up on a mound like this, especially a very grassy mound, is that he's going to be quite well camouflaged from up there. And if something like an impala came close, he would be able to then get right down and drop his head, and he would be very difficult to see him. That, coupled with the fact that there is a slight breeze that is blowing this morning, and so being up on the mound means that he would be able to stay out of that sort of wind that would be drifting towards the impala, and so it would be a little bit higher than where the impala is, and the impala then shouldn't actually pick up his scent, and he'll be able to then stalk from up there. So it's a good place for him to be. Not only can he see what's going on around him, but he can also pick up if the animal does come close. It's a good place to launch an attack from. But isn't he beautiful? Look at that. It's amazing when he kind of looks around to us and you lock eyes with him. It's such a special feeling. So Adele, in the UK, you're wondering if there are any other specific markings that we can use to identify Hosana. Now, for me, Hosana has just a face that I recognize. He's got that sort of pink and black nose, which will change. And we've got that nick out of the left ear. And I know he's got 3 spots on his right cheek. I'm not sure about his left, so I'm sure some of the viewers out there will be able to help us with his spot pattern on the left side. It's funny because for us, I don't often look at markings because we often see these leopards enough that it's almost like when you see your dog, you just know who it is. And so it's like that for me anyway. I know some of the other guides it's a bit different and they'll use spot patterns, but for me it's just kind of the general look of the animal, the size, the area that we're in, and certain facial features that will tell me who it is. And Hosana's kind of got that very boxed face for me, and he's got that little pink nose and rather large ears, and there's really no other young male leopard that would hang around in this area at the moment, and that's what I use. But there definitely will be key identifying features, and I know a lot of the viewers out there spend a lot of time putting together all the ID kits and showing us all the different markings that they have. I know there's some that do it with the hyenas as well, so I'm pretty sure that someone will be able to help us and tell us exactly what they use as a key IDing feature and what spots they like to use to identify Hosana. But most of the time when we do sort of IDs of leopards and you use spot patterns, you mostly use the little spots above the whiskers. So right now those are obscured by the grass, but there are a line of spots that sit just above the whisker line. And on each side there will be a different number of them, and on each individual they'll be in a different place. And so that's probably one of the best ways to ID leopards. So you'll sometimes hear people saying that the leopard's got a 3-2 spot pattern, which would basically mean that it would have 3 spots on its right side of its face and 2 spots on its left side of its face. And so with Hosana you can see very clearly those 3 spots now. Oh, he's now turned his head away again, and that grass is interfering with this whole exercise. But he basically has 3 that come from the nose above the whisker line, and then on the left side he would have a certain number of spots, and each of those will be arranged differently to any other animal out here, and that would be a way that you can ID them. Also use markings around the eye area and the cheek. So, White Lady Ian, you say that he's got a ebony necklace, and I didn't catch the other part, Alice. You said something about under his eyes, but I couldn't catch something about a football. So, football player charcoal under his eye. So, basically those dark black markings under his eye, and then a very, very, very distinct black necklace that comes around his chest area. So, those are the ones that you use to identify him, which I can see. The thing about the black underneath the eyes is that that's a tough one to use, because I have seen Tumba, who is the son of Tundi, another female that we see in this area, and he's also got very sort of dark liners under his eyes. But if that coupled with the sort of nick out of the ear and the 3 spots, then yes, I can see how you can use that for Hosana. So that's a fair enough call. I'm sure there are others. Everybody seems to have their own sort of way of doing it, and some will recognize certain spots better than others. So I'm sure there are other spots that he's got that make it only Hosana. Right, so we're going to stick with Hosana because he's now coming down his mound and seems like he's going to carry on. And while we try and catch up with him and see what he's potentially going to go and look for, I believe James Hendry's got something that Hosana would love to be seeing right here.
Yes, we have a Nyala. I think possibly a little bit ambitious for young Hosana, but you know, he's a young male, as we know. Young males are often a little over-ambitious. There's a rather nice sight of him there, sort of backlit by the sun. Very nice, because it's more cryptic, isn't it, David? It's a little bit like an abstract piece of art, where you're trying to make out what on earth the artist was trying to imply by his picture. And I feel that that is what we're getting from this shot here. A hidden Nyala, with an oxpecker even more cryptically hidden in the bush. Now, we're on to advanced cryptic photography now. You will still be able to see the Nyala if you're particularly skilled at sort of abstract photography, which is what David's going for here. Can you still see it there, David? I'm not as skilled as you see. Let me just go a little bit forward. While I do that, I will tell you that we have had adult female leopard tracks around here, and I don't know who they belong to. One hesitates to use the K word, Karula, I mean, and I don't know, maybe it's possible, but I have consistently said to you that there must be female leopards in Buffelshoek and Torchwood that we're just not seeing. And we're very close to the northeastern corner of our reserve of Djuma, so it could just be a female that's come in from there, and Herbert reckons he has tracked a female around here that has come out of Torchwood, so I don't know. Then younger female leopard tracks on this road here, alarm calling squirrels everywhere, and of course, as you all know, when I have tracks and when I have alarm calls and when I have all the signs that a predator is in the area, you can be almost certain that I will not find the predator. And that's the position in which we find ourselves now. But we did have one cryptic Nyala sighting. That was awesome, wasn't it, Dave? I took 74 pictures of it. I didn't really. It was invisible. Still, a gorgeous morning. Right, the tracks of this animal are still going along the road here. They seem to be... No, this is a badger. Alright, I'm not going to try and track the badger, and so while I am hacking around here, failing miserably, let's go back to he who has succeeded spectacularly. That's Tristan.
Well, James, don't worry. I know perfectly well what it's like to hack around. I hacked around all of yesterday afternoon with not much luck, so I'm sure your luck will change and you will find what you're looking for. But as you can see, we've got a beautiful little butterfly here. So this is one of the Acrea species that is just sunning itself, trying to get nice and warm and get those wings dry from all the dew that would have settled, and before it then starts to take off and flutter about for the day. But there is beauty everywhere in the bush this morning, because as you can see behind that butterfly is the beautiful Hosana, who is just sitting and found himself a nice bit of shade now, and I think that's him for the day. I think he's going to decide this is where he's going to rest for now. And so the butterfly has got the perfect view of a male leopard close to her. Now hopefully Hosana doesn't jump on that butterfly, because that will ruin that butterfly's day, but otherwise he is looking very, very, very sleepy indeed. I think that's the end. And I was wondering what he was going to get up to, because where he's sitting now, unfortunately it's very difficult to see from where we are, but there is a termite mound that is covered in dwarf mongoose, and they're all sitting sunning themselves, and I'm sure Hosana could have seen them, but I think he's just not interested now. It's gotten quite warm. He's been moving around most of the morning, so I think it's time for him to rest. Try again a little bit later in terms of hunting. I don't think he's going to be doing any of that anytime soon. It's amazing how he's found himself a little shady spot. I think earlier when he was on top of the mound, he came down to try and lie down, and there wasn't any shade that he was comfortable in, and that's why he went back onto the top of the mound. Now he's sort of waited it out, and that shadow would have stretched slightly, and he's now got himself the perfect place to spend the morning at least. As soon as the afternoon comes, he's going to be slap bang in the middle of the sun, but the morning it will be nice and cool up against that termite mound. You can see those eyes are starting to shut, and then you'll find the head will start to droop and nod a little bit, and will then drop down. What is interesting is you can see how the ears are still moving though, so even though his eyes are closed and he's going into a period now where he's going to start resting, he still is very aware of his environment, and his ears are still working constantly to hear what's going on around him. And you can see every now and then he does flick his ears, and those are those biting flies that are coming out. You can see them sort of hovering about his face on the right hand side there, so those will be driving him a little bit crazy. And once he lies down, hopefully they'll ease up and leave him alone and go find another victim to go and worry. Hopefully it won't be us, because a biting fly is a horrible little insect. It's really is quite irritating. They sort of hover around your face, and then they land on you and they nip you, and it's sort of this slight stinging sensation. It really is quite horrid. So, well then, you want to know how long do leopards rest in a day? Well, it depends on the individuals, but most of the time you'll find that most leopards will rest for probably, I would say, at least 12 hours of a day. They're not quite as lazy as what the lions are. The lions can go up to about 20 hours a day, but leopards you'll find are actually quite active animals. They move around even in the heat of the day. They move around at night, but their sort of peak times that they move around is around sunset and sunrise, and there will be period of rest in between. So I'd probably say at most you'll find a leopard sleeping maybe 12 hours a day. Other than that, they are moving around and kind of seeing what's happening and finding the food that they need. Now just sniffing the breeze a little bit. You can see there's a bit of a rustle in the grass now from the wind, and that will carry little scent particles that he can pick up. So you'll find every now and then he just lifts his nose and smells, but he's definitely getting very sleepy. Those eyes are starting to droop heavily now, and I reckon he's not long for this. Well, he's going to do a bit of daydreaming and going to lie down and have a really good rest for the hot part of the day. I think it's going to be one of those days. It's going to be very warm. The sun already feels very hot on our backs, so I'm pretty sure that it's going to be a warm day and a perfect day if you're a male leopard to find some shade and sleep. Now, I think what we're going to probably do is carry on and leave Hosana to his nap. There's some other vehicles that do want to come into this area, and so while we do that, I believe Jamie is playing about with trees.
Well, I would love to actually play about with this tree. I think if I were a Husana, this is where I would want to be sleeping, up in the top, in the boughs. A little bit of sun, a little bit of shade. Be absolutely the perfect spot for where I'd want to be if I were a young male leopard searching for a good sleeping patch for the day. But the chances of me getting to the top of this tree, or indeed climbing in any way this particular tree, are next to nothing. Without, short of having a rope and some climbing equipment, I'm not sure that would be entirely possible. Maybe James could do it. James is, of course, the champion tree climber, but I definitely can't. We found our elephants, but they are in... There's a thicket, a Tamboti thicket, where Shadow likes to hide her cubs, in the corner of Djuma, and that's where the elephants are. And with the wind doing this morning, round and round, it's not a good idea to try and follow them in there. And as Herbie said, they're probably going to stay there for the entire day, because they have everything that they want there. There's plenty of food, there's some water. They're not necessarily going to go anywhere. The big male that we were tracking has gone across the road, and we're actually going to move away from these elephants because that area is just far too thick for us to make an approach. And after yesterday, which was an amazing sighting, but it was purely in the hands of the elephants, basically, in terms of what happened with yesterday's sighting, I'm definitely not going to go wandering in there after elephants. I feel as though our luck is... We were very lucky yesterday, because that female was so relaxed. She did give us every sign that she was relaxed, which if she hadn't, I would have moved out immediately. But it was a really special moment, but also one of those moments where you think to yourself, the situation is in my control, but it's also in the control of the elephants. Now, I wanted to show you something really interesting that I've been seeing all morning, and of course, now that I want to show it to you, I can't find any. Do you remember months ago the caterpillars that were targeting the silver cluster leaves? And they actually basically completely stripped the silver cluster leaves of their leaves. Well, the joy of these live safaris is that we get to follow the patterns and the flow of the bush for months and years at a time. And I learned something new. They're back again. Now that the silver cluster leaves have recovered, there's a second wave of caterpillars, same species. I think it was the African migrant, if I'm not very much mistaken. It's the same same butterfly species, same caterpillars, and it's basically because they really, in certain areas, they completely destroyed the silver cluster leaves, or at least took their leaves off. And now that they've recovered, you've got this second group of them, and I find that utterly fascinating. I'll try and find them to show you. You'll recognize them immediately, those of you that have been watching for a while. But it's absolutely amazing that nature plans things out that way, that everything gets utilized in a way that is balanced, that doesn't destroy the trees, that is renewable or sustainable in the way that resources are utilized, which of course is something that human beings are very bad at. We're not very good at the whole using resources sustainably. But it is fascinating the way that nature is able to do that, and the balance that she strikes up. And it seems as though you get waves. You get first the silver cluster leaves being used, then the sennas. The Weltherias are just, as James said, the gift that just keeps giving. But I find it amazing that they do balance things like that. I'm going to keep checking and see if I can't find you some more of them. Or maybe it's just in that one little section of the reserve. Let's just see what Herbie's circled here. What you got there, Herbs? Not sure. Should we go have a look? Aha! Okay. Right. Okay. So the great Herbie is not sure. Okay. This is interesting. So, bird or reptile? Definitely not mammal, because the urea's been excreted as this solid white form. But look at that yellow and then the white. Wait, I need a more suitable crushing stick. Hold on. There we go. Oh, this is so solid. Oh! That is interesting. I definitely don't want to touch it with my fingers. That's the urea part, the white part. That's because birds and reptiles don't urinate. They excrete their excess urea in a solid form. It's a great way of saving water. What is that? Is that just... It looks like a honeycomb. Definitely not a honeycomb. Please don't eat it. I'm going... Ugh. Oh, there's some beetle in there. There's a shiny wing. Can you see that there, Ferg? Oh, get off my stick. There's a shiny wing of some kind of an insect. It smells. something that eats insects. It is a reptile or a bird. I don't think bird, Herbs. The shape's wrong. Long and thin like that. Leguan, maybe? Snake? There's no track of a snake, and this is quite fresh. Maybe this has got something to do with it. Maybe this is a clue. I'm going to figure it out, but while I do, Tristan has got something very small that is probably enjoying the sun.
It is indeed, Jamie. It's much like us. We are loving the bit of sunshine that is coming down. And earlier I was referring to the dwarf mongoose that Hosana was watching, and so there they are on top of their mound. And we're probably, I would say, maybe 50 meters from the mound where Hosana was sitting and is now completely fast asleep. He's dropped his head down and has gone flat, and is almost invisible in the grass. But these are the dwarf mongoose that were catching his attention for a short period of time. And you can see there's one that's right on top and is watching out for the rest. The rest of them have started to move. They've come down the mound and they are now in the grasses and probably going to go and try and find food. But you'll find there's always a sentry that's kind of sitting on top and is watching and looking and making sure that the rest of them are all nice and safe, and should it spot anything like Hosana, it will alarm call and they'll all come bounding into the mound. Oh, we can see a little tail sticking out now, so maybe some more of them will come out and start to sun themselves. When I first spotted them, there was quite a number of them. I see there's one that's come out onto the log there now where there's some sun. That one's going back in. He's warm now. If you go down a little bit, Senzo, you'll find another one. There we go. He's found himself a perfect patch of sun on that fallen over log. And I really love dwarf mongoose. They're such interesting little creatures and always seem like they're up to no good. They kind of scuttle about everywhere and they're always watching and looking and seem to be really having a good time with life. So they're one of my favorite little creatures, and it really is amazing the sort of social interactions that they have and the amount of sort of cohesion they have as a group. It is very, very interesting to watch, especially bearing in mind that they are little carnivores. If you look at most carnivores out here, very few of them are actually pride animals or pack animals. You've just got the wild dogs and the lions, really. The rest of them tend to spend a large majority of their life on their own. So it's quite an unusual thing for such a tight-knit unit of carnivores, and the mongoose families all tend to display that. Well, not all mongoose, but the banded and the dwarf mongoose. Isn't that cute? Hello, little one. It knows we're talking about it. It's now posing. It's on its log. It's like a... Oh, we're looking to the heavens now? I wonder if there's maybe not a bird of prey that's starting to fly. Sometimes you'll find the mongoose start looking up, and then if you scan around, you can actually find a bird flying over above, one of the predatory birds, and they kind of then look out for them. Well, that's all for our mongoose show. By the looks of it, it seems like they've all ducked into their little hideout, and that's where they're going to go for the rest of the day. Now, talking about birds and all things in the air, dwarf mongoose would not be show to you. So let's go across to James and his feathered friend.
My favourite friend? I'm not sure this is my favourite friend. I do like them. That is a grey go-away bird, everybody. Oh, feathered friend. Yes, it is my feathered friend. The grey go-away bird sitting atop a torchwood tree, unsurprisingly in torchwood, and doing not very much, but beautifully framed, just observing the view. It can probably see all sorts of things that we can't, on account of the fact that it is, of course, sitting now 20 meters above the ground. Now, the grey go-away bird reminds me a lot of my childhood, because it is one of the birds that exists in Johannesburg, where I grew up, and you can hear them calling throughout that city of a summer, and it's a nice little touch of the wilderness that you get from it. Here comes Rexon. Aye, Mikwa mizani kwalan. Yingwe, yeah. Yeah, in Torchwood. I'm just telling Rex at the leopard tracks went into Torchwood. Right, so that was our sighting. Better than our Nyala sighting, of course, so things are looking up slightly. I do feel like we're not doing quite as well as the other two, but we're doing our best. Oh, David, there are two of them now. I'm often left wondering what a frugivorous bird like this eats during the course of the winter, because, of course, there's not a lot of fruit for it to eat. That's what frugivorous means, David. It means eats fruit. You are not frugivorous. Yes, but not only. And you'll find that they will have to make do, like the rest of the frugivorous birds, on things like insects, if they can find them. And they will have struggle to find insects as well. And it's one of the reasons, of course, that so many birds will migrate. There's a third one, David. Good grief. And you see that? There's its tail. It's a gathering, a whole breeding herd. Very nice. Cananimous it does, and in fact you wouldn't be the first person to have asked something like this. You said it looks like a black cockatoo. It does. If you look at them carefully, though, if you look at the beak, it's not a seed-eating beak. That beak is not quite hooked enough and toothed enough at the bottom to crack open the husks of seeds in the skilled way that a cockatoo would be able to. But they do look very cockatoo-like, and I always think they look deeply surprised. You know, when that crest sticks up, they look so very surprised to me. I think this may be the first bird call I ever learned, and I learned it because my mother's cat, she's had many cats over the years, of course, they don't last that long, and they used to alarm call. All of her cats have been murderous creatures, and they've savaged the bird life of the greater Johannesburg area, now the Eastern Cape, and these things will alarm call at domestic cats, and I'm pretty sure that's why it's the very first bird call I ever learned. Quack! Now, I've just had a wonderful instruction from the final control to link to Jamie, who has got a very scary-looking Latin-speaking spider.
Very scary, but I'm not sure how much Latin she speaks, especially since, unfortunately, this one is basically deceased. The Latin reference is in reference to the fact that one of the many names for this particular creature, let me not put my shadow on it, is a red Roman. So a red Roman spider. They're not actually true spiders, and we call them solifuges. The reason they're not true spiders, they don't have any spinnerets, they can't spin silk, and they definitely don't have any venom glands. However, as James has told you, they are scary looking, and that's because those jaws are capable of delivering a very, very powerful bite. I'm not sure what happened to this one. They are nocturnal, as you can tell from the pale colour, and she's been injured. I always refer to solifuges as a she, but she's got quite a broad abdomen, which makes me think I'm correct about that. The females are slightly bulkier, and she's been injured in some way. I think most likely suspect is a bird. And these solifuges come out at night. They move very, very rapidly, and they're very difficult to catch. But for something like a small owl, it's entirely possible. And then what you'll probably find is that she bit and fought and got dropped. But unfortunately, damage here is pretty serious. She's obviously been crushed in talons. She's also missing the front of her pedipalps. These limbs on the front here that are basically make it look as though a red Roman has got 5 legs on either side, or 10 legs in total. They don't. These are separate limbs used for catching their food. But she's missing the tips of it. And I'm not 100%. You'll notice I'm quite gingerly touching her with this blade of grass. I'm not 100% convinced that she's fully deceased. I can't see a heartbeat. Usually you can with solifuges. You can see their pulse quite clearly. Pulse is perhaps the wrong word because they don't have blood vessels in the way that we do. They do have an organ. There we go. We've got a suggestion from Tristan as to the culprit behind said squidged solifuge, but I'll get to that in a moment. But just to finish off what I was saying about the organs and the way that their heart beats, very, very simple heart that all it's doing is shifting liquid around because they've got an open system. They don't have blood vessels. It's a hemocele, and the liquid flows because it's got such short distances to travel. That way, gas diffusion, anything like that, diffusion of nutrients, that can happen over a short space without having to have blood vessels to transport things. But there is a rudimentary heart, and it does beat. I can't see it beating. Now, Tristan's guess is that it was a lilac-breasted roller that caught this particular solifuge. That's very specific. I've seen them catch them before. Absolutely could be. I have no reason to disagree with him and no evidence to the contrary. So that's entirely possible. Perhaps it would be that an owl would be more successful. Now, Kirk, that's the exact question I'm asking myself. Why didn't the bird finish it off? I suspect it could be a couple of reasons. She could have fought back, especially if it was a slightly smaller bird, like a lilac-breasted roller. She could have fought back and wriggled loose. They're very strong creatures, and whilst a legs bird, that's not right, a bird's legs are quite tough and scaled, perhaps her jaws managed to meet with a softer part of the bird, and she managed to get away. Or two birds could have fought over it and dropped it and not been able to find it again. Or, I guess potentially, they might have been interrupted by something else. I doubt it was us. I think we would have seen them. This is quite fresh, though. But perhaps something else came around and they decided that their physical safety was more important than finishing off a big meal like this. Perhaps they just couldn't get around to swallowing it. Often birds take on more than they can chew, so to speak, because for that exact reason they don't chew. So sometimes they bite off more than they can swallow. Shame, girl. Still a little bit of resistance from its legs. Well, hopefully a bird comes along and finishes it off. Perhaps even a bird like the one that James has.
I think that this bird would probably finish it off. It is a ground scraper thrush, an insect-eating bird. It rushes along the ground and picks up insects, but it wouldn't be, it wouldn't look askance at an edible arachnid, even if it did have such vicious mandibles as the one you've just been looking at. And they're not very common here, and I always think that they're really quite fun to watch. Hopping around the place, they're beautiful colours, and really kind of interesting that they should be that colour on the front and then so well camouflaged at the back. Male and female, exactly the same colour. It's a very good question, Akeem. I'm not sure that I know the answer to this. You say, I feel like I may have read it though. You say, why do some birds hop and some birds walk? I don't know. One of the reasons is the back claw, I think, is probably one of the reasons. The birds that walk tend to be things like the lapwings and the thick knees, and they don't have, or they've got a very shortened back claw. So most of the passerines, like this bird here, have got 3 front-facing toes and 1 back-facing toe, and the thrushes are no different. And that foot is designed to perch, so they're designed to perch on branches. Obviously, this thing feeds on the ground, and so it hops around on the ground, but the birds that live on the ground and do a lot of running and walking tend not, but like us, to have a back-facing toe. And I think you'll find that the hoppers are probably those with back-facing toes, and it makes it very difficult for them to walk, and therefore they hop. Am I in the sun, David? Yes. So much so that I can't look at the camera. And so I think that's probably why you have some hopping birds and some walking birds. And Royal Gam, you are so amazed with what my favourite is, a hopping or running bird. Well, it's very difficult to say, but I am going to go with hopping. I just think that the hopping is an exceptional way of locomotion. And interestingly, hopping. What kind of hopping? Alice, I'm deeply confused. Is there more than one kind of hopping? Oh, what kind of hopping bird? Right, what kind of hopping bird? Oh, I don't know. I haven't given it much thought, really. I suppose the white-browed scrub robin, which is my favourite bird out here, is a hopper. So probably that one. Shall we move on, David? Good. Hopping birds. Hopping, of course, as I've told some of you before, is an extremely... Oh, there, it's perching. It's not hopping. Is an extremely efficient way of moving. No, that's gorgeous. Yes, it's an extremely efficient way of moving. That's what I said. And it's extremely efficient because it allows the hopper to utilize the potential energy that is built up in the muscles when they spring forward, and the potential energy gained by being in the air. So when you land, if you hop on the ground and you land, it doesn't feel like you've got much energy. It feels like you're losing all the energy that you've got. But there is a certain springiness in the muscles and in the ligaments that must absorb the sort of shock. And if you can utilize that, the sort of elasticity of your muscles that absorb that shock and jump quickly again, it becomes very efficient. And that's how the birds do it. And it's also, of course, how kangaroos do it. And it's why so many things in Australia hop, because it's a very nutrient-poor continent. And if it's a nutrient poor, well, you need to be able to move it the most efficient way possible over long distances, and hopping is a very good way of doing that. You're not a hopper, are you, David? No, you're more a runner. Yes. You don't have a back-facing claw either. No. Nor do kangaroos, of course. Now, I smelt some waterbuck around here, sorry. And I'm rather hoping we might see them, because that's something to look at. It's a mammal. David, do you see any waterbuck anywhere? I'm just going to turn off and ease our way down onto the Cheetah cut line. And I'm not sure if Tristan is still with Hosana. I'm assuming not. And they're probably all trying to find Shungile right now. Tristan does have a sighting, but of a different kind. We're not going to go across to him just yet because I've spotted some Impala. Yes! And the Squirrel. Can you see it there, David? Good morning, Squirrel. I don't actually know whether that's what a squirrel is. Herbert speaks a little bit of Italian. A scleotto, I think he calls it. Well, the scleotto has disappeared. No, there it is. It's right here. Look, it's got a little nest there. See the hole there?
Bottom there.
Bottom there, yeah. It lives there. It's wonderful. And then at the top again. Maurizio, you say fantastico. Yes, thank you very much. It is very fantastico, and that lilac-breasted roller nearly made the Scuriotto's day very much less than fantastico. There, it's going into the hole. There are two of them. I think let's just stay on the hole, because they come in and out very quickly. That's quite a nice little home they have. Of course, they will want to avoid snakes going in and out of it. You can hear the...
Oh, there is.
Have you got him out? Oh, yes. popped his head out. Hello. I think he's sticking his head out because the lilac-breasted roller above is going in a very irritated fashion. Come on, put your head out. This is, of course, the famous African tree squirrel. Famous throughout the land. I'm not sure why I said that. Let's carry on. Now, the male leopard, I don't know if they've told you this, there's been a male leopard found in Torchwood. And the male leopard is Djuma, not Tingana. So Tingana is somewhere around here. Of course, nowhere near where I am. That's much is clear. Right, we're on the southern boundary, everybody. We're going to have a quick Impala sighting. I've no doubt they'll run away as soon as we get anywhere near looking at them. There we go, David. Is that the best Impala sighting you've ever had? Hello, Martin. You're wondering about gazelles and Impala and if they're the same thing. They are not. They are, excuse me, part of a different family. They're very closely related, I suppose, but they're not quite the same. And we don't get any gazelles in this part of the world. We get, our national mammal is a gazelle called a springbok, and we don't find them here. We find them up again in the drier areas. And that's the only gazelle that we get here. Sorry, I just need to move out of the way here. Sir! Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, that's lucky. And what are some of the typical characteristic differences? Well, I suppose male and female gazelles have got horns, as far as I know. And their digestive systems are very similar. Their breeding sort of strategies are very similar. Yeah, so it's very difficult to say. Genetically they must be quite different from each other. But it's now I'm making a hash of explaining to you the big differences because I'm not sure that I know what they are. Anyway, those are not gazelles, those are antelope. Good. On we go. I'm just listening to Herbert talking on the radio. I've lost him. Now we're going to go down towards Twin Dams and see what we can find there. I'm not sure how stable our signal is going to be where we are now, but we will maintain it for as long as we can. Everything's alright? They're still in there. Good. I've just... apparently we're going to go across to Jamie now, and what I heard was that she's on a violent bushwalk.
A violent bushwalk? Never. I don't think we're on a violent bushwalk. Ferg's looking pretty angry over there, but I don't think he's going to get violent anytime soon. Especially not after... Yeah, that was terrifying, Ferg. Definitely not a... Oh, thank you, Herbie. You're a legend. It's got warm all of a sudden. Definitely, Ferg is not going to get violent. I do know what James means, though. We've had a dead solifuge or a dying solifuge. We've had a mantis attacking an ant. What else have we had? Some tracks. They're not very violent. Not at all. Oh, we've made our way all the way I mean, we've walked a fair amount. We've done all of the sort of the western boundary of Djuma. We're now on the southern boundary, and I wasn't planning on walking along Triple M, but bumped into Tristan, who pointed out some tracks of a big male lion coming onto Djuma itself. Question for all of you: do you have any idea which direction that lion came from this afternoon? Or not this afternoon, last night. Do you know if he came from the south? Because I suspect that those lion tracks are him, but I'm not 100% sure, and maybe there's a male lion sitting somewhere in here. I'm not too sure. We're going to sort of slowly but surely make our way in that direction. I don't really want to walk all the way along Gowrie Main, though. It's not a very exciting road to walk along. Might just check carefully here, in case there's a buffalo in the mud wallow. But otherwise, the insects, now that it's started to heat up, the insects are hiding away. The animals are hiding away. We're going to see what else we can find. I might, if there's no other guides that are going in that direction, I might pop my head in and see what Hosana's up to. Just to see how he is still with us on foot, and to see whether or not he's still comfortable with that. I think he will be. I think he'll be exactly the same. I mean, I've sat meters from Hosana, and very soon that's going to... when he becomes independent, those opportunities are gone. That's it. They're done. We'll never ever have those opportunities again with Hosana and Shongile. So it'd be nice to, especially because I'll be going to Kenya in about 3 weeks' time. It'd be very nice to spend the last few moments with them, or the last few weeks enjoying moments like that. Are there any buffaloes in there, Herbs? No. That's good. Let's see whether this male lion popped out here. I doubt it. I think he's going to keep walking that way. I suspect those tracks come from last night. They have been driven over a few times. Don't forget to send through your questions on hashtag Safari Live on Twitter, just while I'm thinking about it. Careful, Ferg. Don't go into the mud. Ferg just did such a very nimble hop, skip, and jump. Did you ever dance, Fergus? Because that was a very neat little sidestep you did. Okay, no sign of the lion coming to drink here. This was one of the leopard cub's favorite spots. Okay, that's interesting. Chris Rogue, thank you for answering the question on the male lion. Apparently he came from the east and headed west. So he came from the east. Maybe it's a different lion. You never know. Unless he went on a little bit of a roundabout route. I'm not too sure. I think it might be worth going to have a look. But let's walk. We're going to continue along the fire break for a little bit and see what we can find on there. The southern boundary is a wonderful place to go. Sorry, that was my fault in the shadow. The southern boundary is always a good place to check, and maybe we might get lucky and bump into little Shongile. That's also what I'm hoping for. And Tristan is convinced that she's somewhere around this area, so perhaps we'll have a chance to see her. And what we'll do is we'll just get Tristan to check Philemon's cut line on his way home if he comes along that route, and maybe he can look for some lion tracks popping out there. I don't think, obviously, the reason I'm not focusing too much on trying to track down that male lion is I don't think he's still on the property. I think he's gone, and I think it's the same one. Thanks. Alright, let's see what else we can find. I'm curious to see whether or not Hosana and Shongile are still following each other around. Dear watcher, you want to know how much do we walk on bushwalk? Probably on average, I would say my walks are usually, it depends what we're doing. Sometimes we walk straight out of camp into a really nice sighting and then we stay there or we walk around the water holes. I would say mine average probably around 7 or so. Ferg, how far do you think we've walked now? Must be about 5.
Between 5 and 50.
Between 5 and 50, says Ferg. Yeah, I tend to do quite long bushwalks, so does James, and Brent tends to sprint. Of course, somebody has to do the hard work out here. He's laughing because he knows exactly what I mean. Someone has to do the hard work around here. We can't all jump on a vehicle. But let's go and see how Tristan's doing on the comfort of the vehicle seat.
Well, I'm not so sure comfort is the right terminology. It's about as corrugated as it gets, and all you end up doing is rattling along and bouncing around, and your teeth end up chattering. So if you see the camera lens shaking, I do apologize. But yes, it is a little bit more comfortable than them probably walking, especially as far as Jamie has walked, because Jamie has walked quite far. I bumped into her just now all the way on Gowrie Main, so it's going to be a long ride home for her, that's for sure. But the reason why we've come up this way is because there was reports of a male lion moving in a easterly direction from Simbambili towards the gate area. So I'm just going to go and have a little look and see. I can't manage to get anybody on the radio to confirm whether or not it's crossed, but I'm going to go and try my luck anyway and just see. Maybe, you never know, one of the Birminghams might have crossed into our side and we might get lucky. Now, it's interestingly enough, apparently 4 of them were seen yesterday, which is the first time in a while that all 4 were seen. There was 2 on a property called Hofmann's, 1 on Vessels with the Sticks and Cubs, and 1 in Arathusa, or sorry, actually not on Arathusa, on Elephant Plains. And so there are a few of them around, and this morning I found tracks of only 1 crossing into Djuma from the southern side, but I believe that there must be another one that would have come from here, because the guys were telling me that it's a different male line that they found this afternoon to the one that they had, this morning to the one that they had yesterday. So, could potentially mean that there's somewhere a sneaky male lion sitting on Djuma, and we're going to try and see if we can't find where that could be. The problem is with these males is that a lot of the time they tend to come through Djuma in the middle of the night and then go north into Buffelshoek and Manyeleti and all of those areas, or into Simbambili. So maybe, just maybe, with a stroke of luck, we'll be able to find these hooligan males somewhere around here. It's been so long since I've seen the Birminghams, and in fact since I've seen any Birminghams together. Now, what is that in the distance there? Let's have a look quickly, Senzo. I can spot something far in the distance, but I don't know what it is. It looks like maybe Impalas. That's what I'm going to go with. And I would have won an award. They are indeed. You can see a bit of the heat haze that is starting to happen now. I was saying earlier that it's quite a warm day today, and you can already see that there's a bit of that heat haze starting to form as the impalas are obscured by it in the distance, and they're all happily feeding along. So no male lion there at this stage, I don't think. So we'll try and see if we can't go past those and a little bit further on. If it did cross, it would have crossed a lot further north than that. Now, unfortunately, we are in Jigga, and Jigga's shocks are not very good, so I don't think I'm going to stay on this particular road for too much longer. Like I say, we've been bounced around a little bit, and it's a little bit unpleasant to be on, so I think we'll probably turn off as soon as we can. Try and use the parallel roads to this to try and see if there's any tracks for those males. Now, there was also a report of elephants somewhere around here, but I haven't seen a single track for them, so there might be magic elephants that have flown, but we'll look out for them as well. And while we do that, I believe James Henry is also in search of something, and so far has been in vain.
Well, everything's been evading me, so there's a very wide category of things to be searching for. In that shadow there, just to the left of that, in fact, just behind that bush. Keep going, keep going, keep going. Yes, in there is another cryptic piece of photography going on. So cryptic that I cannot see where it's gone. There was a duiker. We had a lovely duiker sighting. And the duiker sightings, of course, have been few and far between with the grass this long. Likewise, those of the Steenbok have been, well, conspicuous by their absence. Not there. Alrighty, let's go a little bit forward. We're on the way to Treehouse Dam. I know we've been there we haven't been there this morning, but just as the heat builds, so things are likely to come down towards the water. Oh, please excuse the hat that is perched on my head at a jaunty angle. I'm just trying to protect the side of my face from the sun. I feel it was getting a little bit burned. Do you think it looks nice, David? Do I look gangster?
Yes, very gangster.
Yes, I think I'd be an excellent gangster, don't you?
Yeah, maybe
Maybe a Tsotsi, yes. A Tsotsi, everyone, is a South African gangster. Kirsten McLennan's, I'm not going to say what she said. Okay. we are going towards the Treehouse Dam, as I was saying, because it's getting hot, and so things are going to come down to have a drink. Maybe elephants, maybe there's buffalo that have been around here. It's maybe Zeus the Kudu. That is not Zeus the Kudu. That is Casper, the invisible Kudu. Let's go forward again. There we are. You thought you could hide from us, didn't you? No, you cannot. Not like your cowardly cousin, the Nyala. There we are. Found some friends in amongst the... Continuing the theme of the cryptic photography, abstract photography. Oh, a little baby kudu, 2 cow kudus, one a young cow kudu, one an old cow kudu, and one a baby cow kudu. 3 different sizes, David. Isn't that nice? Reminds me of the 3 bears, and the story of Goldilocks and the porridge. You remember that? Now, kudu, were to see a predator, of course, makes the most outlandish sound. It is a bark. It sounds like a particularly aggravated dog. But they are spectacular looking animals when they're out in the open. But even the little one you can see. Now that male does not have a particularly large rack of horns. They are judged normally by the width of the horns. I mean, whether that actually means that they are effective as male kudu, I'm not sure. But somebody sent me a nice, I forget who it was, and I apologize if you are watching. You sent me a very nice article, well, not article, a tweet about the fact that the spiral horns allow the kudu to keep... how did it go? Apparently the angle at which they turn allows the kudu to keep its potential enemy in view all the time. So they never block the view that the kudu is able to have of its rival, which I thought was very interesting indeed. I'm still trying to figure out how that works. And when I'm talking about the width of the kudu, the point of that is that, when people talk about how kudu are, they have a wide rack, it all comes from the hunting industry. So they've decided that it's valuable. A big dominant kudu bull has got wide horns, but I don't think there's any biological basis for that. There's no reason that a kudu with horns that wide shouldn't be just as dominant as one with wider ones. Now, Rita, you want to know if they are related to the deers. They are not related to the deer. There are no deer in Africa, everybody. There are no resident or naturally occurring deer in Africa. We have a couple of European species that have been naturalized to 1 or 2 areas, not the Kruger Park, of course. They would be removed forthwith if they arrived here. And there is apparently I think a wild population of deer somewhere up near the Atlas Mountains in Morocco. But the kudu are antelope, they are not deer. I don't know if you ever look at an animal, David, and think to yourself, that looks like a friend of mine. Do you know what I mean? I've just had that feeling. Which of course is very unkind. I'm thinking of a woman I know, but she doesn't look like that, obviously, but there was something about the facial expression that the kudu pulled that made me think of her. I'm not going to tell her that, nor her husband, who is about 6 feet and 5 inches tall. and a fairly large and brutish fellow, so I think I'll keep that to myself. Okay, let's move on. The water's just down here. A quick look there. Goodbye. I nearly said her name there. I'm not going to do that. I'm quite impressed with the way I've placed my hat on my head. There's an elephant. Mainly because I have managed not to reveal my bald head, but at the same time move the hat around to its jaunty angle. I knew we should have come down here earlier. This elephant has finished drinking. Maybe he hasn't. He's got a lovely set of tusks. They're asymmetrical, David, which of course is, I suppose for a modern person like you, must be quite appealing. Good grief, did you see that? It's like the Egyptian goose came flying past, suddenly saw the elephant, and then stuck its feet out, as if it was going to have an accident. And of course you can now hear completely that real sort of change in the sound and atmosphere of the bush as we go towards the midday. Well, not midday really, mid-morning. As we start to contemplate the joys of Amanda's breakfast. Of course today is Wednesday, which means it's shopping trip, which means there's not going to be a lot to eat today, David. Just quickly, before we follow the elephant, there's some hippo. You see them there, Dave? Very nice. They aren't really hippo, of course, everyone. They are terrapins. Sometimes confused with hippo. Now, let us... I'm just going to carry on. He seems to be coming across the front of the damn wall, which is very nice. I'll put the hat on straight because the side of my face is no longer exposed to the sun. There we are. Get out of my way. You out of your way. Good morning. Ah, he's a very lovely bull. He's probably about 25 years old, I'd say. Just having a nice morning drink. And now he's having some delicious leaves for breakfast. David, that could well be what we're going to eat for breakfast today. You've seen the parlous state of our pantry. Now, while you're not interested in the vagaries of our shopping order, everybody, I will tell you that the person responsible for the shopping order last week ordered a quite astonishing amount of bacon. Not much else. Oh, okay. Hang on a second. This is quite interesting. Let me sit up and stop talking about the shopping order. I'm not very worried about this chap because he's not very old. He's a youngster, so I think he's just showing us that he's a big and tough fellow, especially with his rapier tusks. He's got a nasty cut in his foot, hey? Oh, and there. He's been stabbed. Well, if this was a very large musk bull, I would be tempted to try and back off, but he's a youngster, so I'm not too worried about him. He's also kicked his back right foot. He's kicked against a stone or something. He's stubbed his toe. Stubbing my toes makes me very angry. Shame. So he's obviously had a bit of conflict, either with another bull, or quite possibly he was in a herd causing trouble, and one of the cows thought, this is no good, and gave him a bit of a push. But his tusks are very cow-like. He's got very thin tusks. And I don't know if that represents any kind of hormonal difference from the big thick tusked bulls. But if you saw just what you're looking at now, you'd be tempted to say that's a cow straight off, because the cows tend to have straighter and thinner tusks. And this guy has got a very thin, straight tusk. He doesn't look very comfortable or very happy. So maybe he's feeling a little bit lonely. I wish we understood the social dynamics of elephants a bit better. I wish we understood how their emotions work, because they certainly seem to be emotional creatures. Oh, he's got a small flatulence issue, but that's okay. Anybody who eats, or any animal that eats that amount of vegetation, is going to have that issue, because they do, of course, have an enormous amount of bacteria in their guts, which in turn produce an enormous amount of gas. So he'll just have to lurk around on his own. He's also not looking in the best of condition. His bones are sticking out a little bit. And that's not ideal, especially at this time of the year. I mean, he should be in tip-top shape after a good rainy season with lots of good stuff to eat. And interestingly, he's not grazing at all. He's only browsing right now. He's eating ziziphus, which tends to be a great elephant favorite, the buffalo thorn. Hello, Violet. You say, do elephants get tusk cavities? They don't get cavities, no. I mean, they don't. Those that, they tend to stay off the toffees and off the Coca-Cola. And so what tends to happen is that they avoid getting cavities, which of course are caused in us by foods we were never designed to eat. But, Violet, they can get abscesses. So the nerve can die inside the tooth there. I mean, and in us that's often caused by a cavity, but I think in them probably caused by some other form of infection that's come in via the mouth. And then it can be very painful, and eventually the tusk will fall out, but they can be very, very nasty when they have that sort of experience where they have, they get these dreadful, they get dreadful pain, and then they become quite nasty. They become quite, I hate to use the term aggressive, but they can become aggressive because of the pain. Hello, Riti. Of course, the most clear question, I guess, about them is the one you've asked about whether or not the tusks, or why they have the tusks. What is the point of having tusks on the front of your face like that? Well, as with horns, they are there for defense to some extent, but they're also very, very useful for feeding. And he will use those tusks, and you can see that I'm not sure why his right one is so much shorter than his left. I suspect it could be because he uses it more. But he will use it to scrape and chip away at bark in trees. He'll use it to wedge branches between his trunk and his tusks so that he can break them more effectively, more easily. And he will use them to dig up roots and that sort of thing. So largely for feeding, Riti, although they can, of course, be used for defense. But I think if their principal purpose was defense, I think you'd find that they were the same on all elephants, in the same way that they are the same or very similar in most antelope species. Not most antelope species, but antelope within a species. Nice. He's moved on to some grass. And I guess there must be an element of display as well, perhaps, to the cows. Perhaps there's an element of displaying how big their tusks are, and maybe big... I'm not sure if the evidence shows that big-tusked elephants have got a greater chance of mating than small-tusked ones. I'm not sure about that. Poor fellow, he looks a bit forlorn for some reason. Jenny, you're wondering about what kind of illnesses an elephant can get. Actually, I'm not actually sure. I don't think they get common colds and that sort of thing. They don't suffer from domestic animal diseases, so they don't get things like, bovine tuberculosis or corridor diseases or that sort of thing. So I'm not sure what they get. I think you'll probably find that they must be filled with parasites, as we all are, and I'm sure those parasites sometimes, the load of parasites sometimes creates an amount of disease. But I couldn't tell you exactly what those were. We think elephants are able to self-medicate themselves. So they will find a tree that helps them to look better. To feel better if they're feeling a bit peaky. But I couldn't tell you exactly what those illnesses were, I'm afraid. But he's now completely comfortable with us, and I think he was just shaking his head at us, telling us that he's big and strong and not to be trifled with on a day like today. And we won't trifle with him, will we, David? Indeed, I think we shall probably leave him wandering off towards the Kudus. That is a very peaceful scene. And let's just have a quick look at that bird there. A starling. Laurie, you're wondering about whether or not the herd would chase away a diseased elephant. No, I don't think they would at all. I think it would be quite the opposite. They are very good at looking after their sick, aged and infirm. So I think that they probably would not chase it away at all. I'm not sure that they have any understanding of infection. I mean, you think how long it took for us human beings to understand infection, and how long it took for us to figure out that infection, we call it bacterial pathogens, travel in the air. I'm not sure that the elephants have managed to figure that out. Okay, let's head across to Tristan. He is still very bravely, and I must say stoically and manfully, searching for the lions.
Well, our search for the lions has not gone well at all. There is nothing that we can find. There is only a track that goes into Manyaleti, but nothing that is too fresh. It looks like it was from early last night. So it's not the lion that we were hoping to find. I believe he's still probably somewhere on Simamili, but it will be good for this afternoon, potentially this evening. As the sun sets, maybe he'll get up and move and start moving towards the area and back into Vuatela. So we're just now bumbling around, hoping to find something interesting. So far it's been a very, very pleasant morning. It's been nice just to go around and see Husana and just to see all the sights again after being away for a few days. It's very, very pretty in the bush at the moment, and still a little green tinge after that rain, so still feels a little bit summery. But we do have a roadblock up ahead, which is a whole bunch of impalas. Good morning, ladies. Now, I'm sure you lot did not sleep very well at all. So, Tutukat, you're wondering whether prey animals would recognize predator tracks. Well, if it's quite fresh, then they do. They often find something like buffalo. They'll come along, and if lions have walked there, they stop and they sniff and they really look around to see what's going on. So they do recognize that there is probably a scent more than the actual footprint itself. Footprint itself, I don't think they care too much, but it does leave behind a scent, and that is what will sort of trigger the response from a prey animal. So whenever they sort of come across an area where a predator has walked, you'll find that they'll stop and they'll be a lot more aware of what's going on. But as you can see, our ladies are slowly starting to move now. They're coming out of the open clearings and are now moving into the thickets to try and find some shade and food. But they would have had a very tough night last night. They are the herd that comes from quarantine, which means they would have had male lions roaring around them. They would have had leopard sawing as well. So it would have probably been a very sleepless night for the Impala herd of quarantine clearings. And see a little baby that's just relieving itself. It's amazing how much they've grown, these little ones. I tend to forget that they were only born a few months ago. Some of these little Impala lambs are only 5-6 months old, so they really are quite big compared to when they're born. They're so little and fragile when they're born, and they grow and develop very quickly. You can see there's a little male with his small horns that have now popped through. Very, very, very pretty. And a little oxpecker that's driving him mad and going into the ears and up the nose. Always makes me laugh when the oxpeckers are on these antelopes' heads. You can see they go all over the place. And it must be so frustrating to have a bird climbing inside your ear from time to time. You can see he tried to get rid of the oxpecker, but this oxpecker is clinging for dear life at this stage. There we go. Just grooming around those horn areas. Is that not very comfortable, little one? There we go, that's far more comfortable. Now this is the red-billed oxpecker. So we see two types of oxpeckers in this area. We get the yellow-billed and the red-bills. The red-bills are the far more common species that we see, and you'll find them on most of the antelope, cleaning and sort of grooming them and making sure they get rid of all those parasites that these antelope often pick up by walking through the grass. So Jamie, I believe, has had a bit of luck on bushwalk, so let's quickly go across to her and see what she's got.
We have indeed had some luck. We've got some moving grass on top of a termite mound. That is Hosana, sneaking round, having a look at us. Can you see him from that side, Herbie? Let's just go, Ferg, let's just go around ever so slightly. Obviously we're not going to scare him, and we're not going to stay for too long. It's the last opportunity that we're going to have to do this. One of my last opportunities. Keep going, Ferg. There he is. Hello, my boy. Hey, I'm gonna miss this. Gonna miss you. Yes, little one. I'm glad that when I do leave, I'll know that he's healthy, happy, and more than capable of looking after himself. And he won't stay this comfortable and relaxed. I mean, we're less than 10 meters away from him. And you never ever get to do that with a wild leopard except here. With these special cubs. It really is an absolute privilege. Hey, my man. You look after yourself, huh? Not that I'm not leaving just yet, but this might be the very last opportunity I get to spend any time with him on foot. Who knows what may happen in the next 3 weeks. Taking this opportunity is special. You're so invisible. Yes, you are. We can't see you. Promise. It's okay, little man. Sweet. These are the leopard cubs that have given me the most amazing opportunities to spend with them on foot. It's really very special. And what we're going to do is we're going to leave now. That's all. I just wanted to say hello and bye-bye to him on foot, in case the opportunity doesn't present itself in the future. I'm sure I'll see him again on drive before I leave, and we'll be back, of course. But things won't be the same. They won't ever be the same as they have been now with Shongila and Hosana. Two special little leopards. We are close. We're very close. I don't want to push it too much. And I don't want to make him feel like he has to move. Yeah, my beautiful little boy. So as soon as we finish the end of the sunrise safari, then we'll head off. Hopefully James or Tristan will give us a lift home. But this is definitely the best ever ending. Can't believe how invisible he is. Flat up against that termite mound. With skills like that, I think Hosana is going to be absolutely fine. The ability to hide. There really is not another place in the world you can do this with a leopard. And certainly not that many leopards even here. Tingana's not the same. But Karula, well, we've been lucky with her and we've been lucky with her cubs. On that note, it is time for us to start heading for breakfast. I can hear my stomach rumbling, and perhaps, unless Hosana is going to provide me with some bacon and eggs, I think it's time for us to head home. So a big thank you to Ferg for his wonderful camera work. I'm sorry I walked you all over the reserve.
Really enjoyed it.
I did too. And then a very special thank you to Alice and to Megan in Final Control. And most importantly, a big thank you to all of you for joining us on the Sunrise Safari. What I'm going to do for the last 20 seconds, I'm going to duck in front of you. I'm going to see if we can give you one last view. He's so hidden. Alright, we'll follow up with him on the Sunset Safari, everybody. But until we see you then, there's a twitching ear. Have a wonderful day.